Hi, friends, and welcome to the Harbor Breeze Home Podcast, where we talk about home and some of the life lessons learned there. I'm Rita Joy, your host, and today is part 2 of the Holly Jolly Christmas series. Each day this week, I'm posting a new blog post in this Christmas mini-series over at Harbor Breeze Home, and since some of you would rather listen or watch than read, I'm recording it as well. Today's topic is all about Christmas trees. From fabulously fur to wonderfully faux, we're going to talk about it all and tell some funny mishap stories too. And for those of you listening and watching, know that in the blog post I'm linking in the show notes, you'll find pictures of our personal Christmas trees from years past, along with links to go see the original posts. You just might find some Christmas tree decorating ideas or a few laughs from posts from the past. So here we go. What's a perfect Christmas tree anyway? The first thing you may notice as you approach your first Christmas as a newlywed is that you and your spouse may differ greatly on your definitions of the perfect Christmas tree, along with the timing of when to get and set up that perfect tree. I can't say that I had a really strong opinion at first about the tree, but I certainly did about the timing. You see, I'd grown up in Montana with grandparents who were snowbirds. Every year, right after Thanksgiving, they'd pack up their giant Ford LTD car and head to Texas to enjoy blue sky and sunshine instead of freezing cold and snowstorms. So Thanksgiving dinner, with all its amazing turkey and Thanksgiving side dishes, was immediately followed with Christmas with Grandma and Grandpa. There was always a tree up by Thanksgiving, so that's what I wanted our new family tradition to be. The only problem? Did I mention I married a Canadian? And we live in Canada. Up here in these parts, Thanksgiving is early October. Early October. Of course, we'd only been married 2 short months when our first October together rolled around. In the spirit of being wildly in love and figuring out how to navigate this new world as newly marrieds, neither one of us wanted to disappoint the other. I wanted a tree by Canadian Thanksgiving, and he wanted to chop down a real tree in the woods. So that's what we did. I had never in my livelong days chopped down a tree right in the wilds of the woods. This was not a Christmas tree farm, y'all. It was just the woods. I remember that part being a great adventure, tromping around the snow, choosing a tree, chopping it down, dragging it to our car, and strapping it on the top like a scene straight from a sappy Hallmark Christmas movie. But of course, it went downhill from there. I remember that tree was the source of our very first, very large argument. I wanted white lights. He wanted colored. It caused trouble. There were tears on my part and compromise on both of our parts. And by the time Christmas rolled around, that Christmas tree was so dry with needles dropping daily that we never have made that same mistake again. So with that preamble, here's some lessons we've learned throughout 33 years in the Christmas tree department. Here are some tips for choosing and using a real Christmas tree. Along with the Christmas tree tips and tricks, I've included pictures and links to our Christmas trees from the past. As you will see, the photo size requirements have changed over the years, so my early tree pictures look kind of sad here on the blog, but the memories are pretty fun. I thought you might like to read them. So if you are over on the blog post that I'll link in the show notes, you will find there's a button beside the picture that you can click on and go to the original posts. Tip number 1, choose the right kind of tree. Since my husband is a pro at identifying trees, he used to work in a sawmill and he was a lumber grader. That was one of his jobs at a sawmill, so he knows trees. So he's a pro at identifying trees, and he was in his element at this part. You're going to want to choose a fir or a pine tree, and under no circumstances should you try to use a hemlock tree. It will lose its needles nearly immediately. Tip number 2 is measure your space and secure the tree well. Before you purchase a tree, Measure the space you're going to put it in and choose one that fits. You just might need to take a tape measure along. When setting it up, tie the tree to the ceiling and or the wall to secure it. Ask us how we know. Yes, we have had a live tree fall over in the middle of the night. It's not a good scene. You can read about that in an older post that I've linked on the blog. Tip number 3, watering is key. Get yourself a really good tree stand that holds water and make sure there's water in it every day. Move the tree away from any heat sources that would dry it out too. Here are some other tips when choosing a real Christmas tree. Look for a tree with bright green needles, which indicates it's fresh. If you buy a tree that's already been cut previously, cut the trunk fresh when you get home so it absorbs the water really well. And always keep in mind fire safety when you have a real tree. Make sure the lights you put on it don't get too hot and keep it away from heat sources like wood stoves, fireplaces, and things like that can make it dry out faster too. And always have a fire extinguisher handy and know how to use it in case something goes wrong. Another thing to think about is how you're going to dispose of your tree after you use it. There are often recycling programs depending on where you are. And last year I found out that there's a recycling program in some places involving goats. Did you know that goats love Christmas trees? So some places have a recycling program where you can take trees to goats and they love them. So a real Christmas tree was part of our family tradition for 24 years. Sometimes my husband would take our little boys out to the woods and chop them down. If we didn't have energy for that, we would pick up a real tree when they arrived at our grocery store. If you love real Christmas trees and you're in a season of life that is important to you, go for it. But now that I've experienced a fake tree, I do think that real trees are a whole lot more work in every way. But some would argue that it's worth it. I'll leave that up to you to decide. When we moved into our current townhouse, we are in a strata situation. Some people call it a homeowners association or something like that. But we're in a strata situation that doesn't allow real trees for fire safety reasons. So at the point that we moved here, we entered into our faux Christmas tree era. And can I say, I'm a real fan. So here are some tips for choosing a faux Christmas tree. I'll be honest, we didn't spend a lot of time researching before we bought our first faux Christmas tree. We just kept our eye open for sales and bought the least expensive one we could find. It's 8 years later now, and I have absolutely no regrets with our humble little Christmas tree. Here are some things to consider when you're choosing your faux Christmas tree. Number 1, choose a spot to put it and again, measure before you go shopping. Just like a real tree, you'll want to preface your shopping with figuring out the dimensions you need. You don't want to come home with a tree only to find it looked much smaller in the store, but it won't even stand in your house. Tip number 2 is to decide if you want a pre-lit Christmas tree or not. One of the big decisions you'll need to make is whether you want to buy a tree with built-in lights or not. The pro is that the lights are built right in. The con is that I've heard eventually they may stop working. So ours is not pre-lit and we need to string our twinkle lights on strand by strand. Tip number 3, you can set a short tree on a wooden box to make it appear higher. One year, I wanted to put the tree in a different spot and I wanted it to be higher. So I set it on a wooden box and covered it with a big plaid blanket. The bonus is that it made a lot of extra space underneath the Christmas tree that we could stack presents. Here are a few more tips for choosing faux trees. If you choose a faux tree without lights, last year I discovered really fun twinkle lights that just twinkle every few lights in the strand. So it's not wild twinkle lights. It's just a really subtle twinkling light that I just love. I've linked those in the blog post as well. If your place is small like ours, you might want to consider a slimline Christmas tree. I've noticed those and they are really nifty for small spaces, and they look great. They're fun to decorate, but they're just a lot slimmer. If you're going for a faux tree and wanting to save money, be sure to watch for sales. They often go on sale before and after Christmas. Now, I would love so much to know if you have a fun or funny Christmas tree story or memory. It seems like lots of us do. Let me tell you, when our Christmas tree, our real Christmas tree with its ginormous watering tree stand underneath, tipped over in the middle of the night and caused a little mini flood in our living room that went down into the basement and dripped onto our satellite receiver. So our TV stopped working. That was a really memorable Christmas tree moment. Made even more memorable when I called the satellite company asking if they had any Christmas miracle specials because we'd had a disaster. The guy ended up laughing so hard, he sent me one for free. So there's power in a good, funny story. Anyway, if you have a great, funny Christmas tree story, I would love to hear it in the comments of the blog post I will put in the show notes. I'm looking forward to reading your stories already. So that's what today's little post is on Christmas. And until tomorrow, I'll see you later. Toodaloo.